Long before bedtime stories were soft and sweet, there were tales meant to whisper lessons through magic, danger, and wonder. Tonight we journey into the heart of the Brothers Grimm, where princes aren't always charming, forests are never what they seem, and even a simple bird or mouse can change fate itself. If you enjoy curling up with stories that feel both familiar and new, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. It helps this little story nook grow. Now take a breath, let the world quiet around you, and let's begin with The Golden Bird. Once upon a time, there was a king who had a beautiful garden. In that garden stood a tree that bore golden apples. These apples were always counted carefully, but when they began to ripen, it was found that each night one was missing. The king grew angry and ordered his gardener to keep watch beneath the tree. The gardener sent his eldest son, but around midnight the boy fell asleep, and by morning another apple was gone. The second son tried next, but he too slept through the night. Then the youngest son offered to keep watch. His father was afraid something bad might happen to him, but at last he agreed. At midnight, as the clock struck 12, the boy heard a soft rustling in the air. A bird of pure gold came flying down and began to peck at one of the apples. The boy leapt up and shot an arrow, but it did the bird no harm. Only one golden feather fell from its tail as it flew away. In the morning the feather was brought to the king. His council gathered, and everyone agreed it was worth more than all the riches of the kingdom. But the king said, "One feather is of no use to me. I must have the whole bird." The gardener's eldest son set out to find the golden bird. He soon came to a forest where he saw a fox sitting by the roadside. He raised his bow to shoot, but the fox called out, "Do not shoot me, and I will give you good counsel." The fox warned him to avoid the bright, cheerful inn and stay at the shabby one instead. But the young man thought, what could a fox know? He ignored the advice and went to the fine inn where there was singing and laughter, and there he forgot his quest. When the eldest son did not return, the second went after him. He too met the fox, heard the same warning, and ignored it. When he reached the village, his brother was at the window of the merry inn, calling to him to come in. Unable to resist, he joined the celebration and forgot the golden bird and home, just as his brother had. At last, the youngest son begged to go. His father was reluctant, but the boy's heart was set. As he entered the forest, he met the fox, and this time he listened. The fox said gently, "Sit upon my tail, and you will travel faster." The boy obeyed, and away they went over hills and valleys until their hair whistled in the wind. That night, the boy stayed at the shabby inn, just as the fox had advised. In the morning, the fox appeared again. "Go straight until you find a castle," he said. "Before it lie sleeping soldiers. Do not wake them. Inside, the golden bird sits in a wooden cage beside a beautiful golden one. Take care, do not move it." Everything was as the fox said. But when the boy saw the dull wooden cage, he thought, it would be foolish to take such a treasure home in that. He placed the bird in the golden cage. The bird screamed so loudly that the guards awoke, and he was taken prisoner. The king told him, "You shall die, unless you bring me the golden horse that runs as swiftly as the wind." The boy set out again, weary and hopeless. But soon the fox appeared once more. "You see what comes of ignoring advice," said the fox. "Still, I will help you again." He told the boy how to take the horse and warned him to use the old leather saddle. But when the boy saw the shining golden saddle, he could not resist. The groom awoke, shouting, and the boy was caught again. This time he was told he could save his life only by bringing the beautiful princess from the faraway castle. The fox appeared once more, patient and kind. "Go to the castle," he said. "At midnight, the princess will go to the bathhouse. Kiss her and she will come with you, but do not let her take leave of her father." All happened as foretold. But when the princess wept and begged to say farewell, the boy's heart softened. The The moment she entered her father's hall, the guards awoke and seized him. The king said, "You shall never have my daughter unless you remove the hill that blocks the view from my window within 8 days." The boy worked for 7, accomplishing little. Then the fox came again, saying softly, "Lie down and sleep. I will do it for you." When he awoke, the hill was gone. The king kept his word, and the boy rode away with the princess. "We will have all 3, said the fox, "the princess, the horse, and the bird." Everything went according to plan. The boy had all 3, and they fled together. Then the fox said, "Now please kill me and cut off my head and feet." The boy refused, so the fox said, "Then at least remember this: ransom no one from the gallows and sit beside no river." He promised, and soon forgot. He ransomed his 2 wicked brothers from the gallows, and later, resting beside a river, they turned on him. They threw him down the bank, took the princess, the horse, and the bird, and returned home in triumph. But the horse would not eat, the bird would not sing, and the princess wept without ceasing. The youngest son, broken but alive, was saved by the faithful fox. He returned in disguise to the palace. As soon as he entered, the horse began to eat, the bird sang again, and the princess's tears dried. The truth came out, and the wicked brothers were punished. The youngest son married the princess, and in time became king. Long afterward, the young king walked once more in the forest. There he met the fox, who said softly, "Now please kill me and cut off my head and feet." At last, the king obeyed, and in that instant, the fox was transformed into a man. The princess's long-lost brother freed from an ancient spell, and from that day forward, they all lived happily ever after. The end. Hans in Luck by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Some men are born to good luck. All they do or try to do comes right. All that falls to them is so much gain. All their geese are swans. All their cards are trumps. Toss them which way you will, they will always, like poor puss, alight upon their legs and only move on so much the faster. The world may very likely not always think of them as they think of themselves, but what care they for the world? What can it know about the matter? One of these lucky beings was neighbour Hans. 7 long years he had worked hard for his master. At last he said, "Master, my time is up. I must go home and see my poor mother once more. So pray pay me my wages and let me go." And the master said, "You have been a faithful and good servant, Hans, so your pay shall be handsome." Then he gave him a lump of silver as big as his head. Hans took out his pocket handkerchief, put the piece of silver into it, threw it over his shoulder, and jogged off on his road homewards. As he went lazily on, dragging one foot after another, a man came in sight, trotting gaily along on a capital horse. "Ah," said Hans aloud, "what a fine thing it is to ride on horseback. There he sits as easy and happy as if he were at home in the chair by his fireside. He trips against no stones, saves shoe leather, and gets on he hardly knows how." Hans did not speak so softly but that the horseman heard it all and said, "Well, friend, why do you go on foot then?" "Ah," said Hans, "I have this load to carry. To be sure it is silver, but it is so heavy that I can't hold up my head, and you must know it hurts my shoulder sadly." "What do you say of making an exchange?" said the horseman. "I will give you my horse, and you shall give me the silver, which will save you a great deal of trouble in carrying such a heavy load about with you." "With all my heart," said Hans. "But as you are so kind to me, I must tell you one thing. You will have a weary task to draw that silver about with you." However, the horseman got off, took the silver, helped Hans up, gave him the bridle into one hand and the whip into the other, and said, "When you want to go very fast, smack your lips loudly together and cry, 'Jip!'" Hans was delighted as he sat on the horse, drew himself up, squared his elbows, turned out his toes, cracked his whip, and rode merrily off, 1 minute whistling a merry tune and another singing, "No care and no sorrow, a fig for the morrow, we'll laugh and be merry, sing nay down derry." After a time he thought he should like to go a little faster, so he smacked his lips and cried, "Chip!" Away went the horse full gallop, and before Hans knew what he was about, he was thrown off and lay on his back by the roadside. His horse would have run off if a shepherd, who was coming by driving a cow, had not stopped it. Hans soon came to himself and got upon his legs again, sadly vexed, and said to the shepherd, "This riding is no joke when a man has the luck to get upon a beast like this. That stumbles and flings him off as if it would break his neck. However, I'm off now once for all. I like your cow now a great deal better than this smart beast that played me this trick and has spoiled my best coat, you see, in this puddle, which, by the by, smells not very like a nosegay. One can walk along at one's leisure behind that cow, keep good company, and have milk, butter and cheese every day into the bargain. What would I give to have such a prize?" "Well," said the shepherd, "if you are so fond of her, I will change my cow for your horse. I like to do good to my neighbours, even though I lose by it myself." "Done," said Hans merrily. "What a noble heart that good man has," thought he. Then the shepherd jumped upon the horse, wished Hans and the cow good morning, and away he rode. Hans brushed his coat, wiped his face and hands, rested a while, and then drove off his cow quietly, and thought his bargain a very lucky one. "If I have only a piece of bread, and I certainly shall always be able to get that, I can, whenever I like, eat my butter and cheese with it, and when I am thirsty I can milk my cow and drink the milk. And what can I wish for more?" When he came to an inn, he halted, ate up all his bread, and gave away his last penny for a glass of beer. When he had rested himself, he set off again, driving his cow towards his mother's village. But the heat grew greater as noon came on, till at last, as he found himself on a wide heath that would take him more than an hour to cross, he began to be so hot and parched that his tongue clave to the roof of his mouth. "I can find a cure for this," thought he. "Now I will milk my cow and quench my thirst." So he tied her to the stump of a tree and held his leathern cap to milk into. But not a drop was to be had. Who would have thought that this cow, which was to bring him milk and butter and cheese, was all that time utterly dry? Hans had not thought of looking to that. While he was trying his luck in milking and managing the matter very clumsily, the uneasy beast began to think him very troublesome, and at last gave him such a kick on the head as knocked him down, and there he lay a long while senseless. Luckily, a butcher soon came by, driving a pig in a wheelbarrow. "What is the matter with you, my man?" said the butcher as he helped him up. Hans told him what had happened, how he was dry and wanted to milk his cow, but found the cow was dry too. Then the butcher gave him a flask of ale, saying, "There, drink and refresh yourself. Your cow will give you no milk. Don't you see she is an old beast, good for nothing but the slaughterhouse?" "Alas, alas," said Hans, "who would have thought it? What a shame to take my horse and give me only a dry cow. If I kill her, what will she be good for? I hate cow beef. It is not tender enough for me. If it were a pig now, like that fat gentleman you are driving along at his ease, one could do something with it. It would at any rate make sausages." "Well," said the butcher, "I don't like to say no when one is asked to do a kind, neighbourly thing. To please you I will change, and give you my fine fat pig for the cow." "Heaven reward you for your kindness and self-denial," said Hans, as he gave the butcher the cow, and taking the pig off the wheelbarrow, drove it away, holding it by the string that was tied to its leg. So on he jogged, and all seemed now to go right with him. He had met with some misfortunes, to be sure, but he was now well repaid for all. How could it be otherwise with such a travelling companion as he had at last got? The next man he met was a countryman carrying a fine white goose. The countryman stopped to ask what o'clock was. This led to further chat, and Hans told him all his luck, how he had made so many good bargains, and how all the world went gay and smiling with him. The countryman then began to tell his tale, and said he was going to take the goose to a christening. "Feel," said he, "how heavy it is, and yet it is only 8 weeks old. Whoever roasts and eats it will find plenty of fat upon it. It has lived so well." "You're right," said Hans as he weighed it in his hand. "But if you talk of fat, my pig is no trifle." Meantime the countryman began to look grave and shook his head. "Hark ye," said he, "my worthy friend, you seem a good sort of fellow, so I can't help doing you a kind turn. Your pig may get you into a scrape. In the village I just came from, the squire has had a pig stolen out of his sty. I was dreadfully afraid when I saw you that you had got the squire's pig. If you have and they catch you, it will be a bad job for you. The least they will do will be to throw you into the horse pond. Can you swim?" Poor Hans was sadly frightened. "Good man," cried he, "pray get me out of this scrape. I know nothing of where the pig was either bred or born, but he may have been the squire's for aught I can tell. You know this country better than I do. Take my pig and give me the goose." "I ought to have something into the bargain," said the countryman. "Give a fat goose for a pig, indeed! 'Tis not everyone would do so much for you as that. However, I will not be hard upon you, as you are in trouble." Then he took the string in his hand and drove off the pig by a side path, while Hans went on his way homewards, free from care. "After all," thought he, "that chap is pretty well taken in. I don't care whose pig it is, but wherever it came from, it has been a very good friend to me. I have much the best of the bargain. First there will be a capital roast, then the fat will find me in goose grease for 6 months, and then there are all the beautiful white feathers. I will put them into my pillow, and then I am sure I shall sleep soundly without rocking. How happy my mother will be! Talk of a pig, indeed! Give me a fine fat goose." As he came to the next village, he saw a scissor grinder with his wheel, working and singing, "O'er hill and o'er dale, so happy I roam, work light and live well, all the world is my home. Then who so blithe, so merry as I?" Hans stood looking on for a while, and at last said, "You must be well off, Master Grinder. You seem so happy at your work." "Yes," said the other, "mine is a golden trade. A good grinder never puts his hand into his pocket without finding money in it. But where did you get that beautiful goose?" "I did not buy it. I gave a pig for it." "And where did you get the pig?" "I gave a cow for it." "And the cow?" "I gave a horse for it." "And the horse?" "I gave a lump of silver as big as my head for it." "And the silver?" "Oh, I worked hard for that 7 long years." "You have thriven well in the world hitherto," said the grinder. "Now if you could find money in your pocket whenever you put your hand in it, your fortune would be made." "Very true, but how is that to be managed?" "How? Why, you must turn grinder like myself," said the other. "You only want a grindstone, the rest will come of itself. Here is one that is but little the worse for wear. I would not ask more than the value of your goose for it, but will you buy?" "How can you ask?" said Hans. "I should be the happiest man in the world if I could have money whenever I put my hand in my pocket. What could I want more? There's the goose." "Now," said the grinder, as he gave him a common rough stone that lay by his side, "this is a most capital stone. Do but work it well enough, and you can make an old nail cut with it." Hans took the stone and went his way with a light heart. His eyes sparkled for joy, and he said to himself, "Surely I must have been born in a lucky hour. Everything I could want or wish for comes of itself. People are so kind. They seem really to think I do them a favour in letting them make me rich and giving me good bargains." Meantime he began to be tired and hungry too, for he had given away his last penny in his joy at getting the cow. At last he could go no further, for the stone tired him sadly. He dragged himself to the side of a river that he might take a drink of water and rest a while. So he laid the stone carefully by his side on the bank. But as he stooped down to drink, he forgot it, pushed it a little, and down it rolled, plump into the stream. For a while he watched it sinking in the deep, clear water. then sprang up and danced for joy, and again fell upon his knees, and thanked heaven, with tears in his eyes, for its kindness in taking away his only plague, the ugly heavy stone. "How happy am I!" cried he. "Nobody was ever so lucky as I." Then up he got with a light heart, free from all his troubles, and walked on till he reached his mother's house, and told her how very easy the road to good luck was. The end. Jorinda and Jorindel, a bedtime retelling inspired by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, deep within a dark and whispering forest stood an old crumbling castle. Inside that castle lived a strange old fairy. She was not like the fairies from happy stories, for she could take on any shape she wished. By day she might soar through the sky as an owl, or creep softly through the countryside like a black cat. But when night fell, she would return to her true form, that of an old pale woman, with eyes that glowed and a nose and chin that almost touched. Now this fairy's castle was a place of great danger. If any young man came within 100 paces of it, he would be frozen in place, unable to move until the fairy released him, but only after he promised never to return. And if a young maiden wandered too close, the fairy would transform her into a bird, trap her in a golden cage, and hang her in a high chamber of the castle. There were 700 such cages, each holding a beautiful, helpless bird. Among all the young people who lived near that forest, there was one maiden named Jorinda, fairer and kinder than any other. And there was a shepherd lad named Jorindel, who loved her dearly. They were soon to be married, and one evening they walked together into the woods, wanting a quiet moment alone. "It's a lovely night," said Jorindel, "but we must take care not to wander too near the old fairy's castle." The golden rays of the setting sun glowed through the tall trees. Turtle doves cooed gently from the branches, and the air was soft and still. Jorinda sat down beneath the birch tree to watch the sun sink lower, and Jorindel sat beside her. A strange sadness filled their hearts, neither knew why, as if some great sorrow was about to come between them. When they finally looked around to find the path home, they realized they were lost. The sun was almost gone now, half hidden behind the hills, and then Jorindel looked behind him, and his heart froze. Through the trees he could see the dark walls of the castle looming above them. "Jorinda," he whispered. But before she could answer, she began to sing softly. The ring-dove sang from the willow spray, "Well-a-day, well-a-day." He mourned for the fate of his darling mate, well-a-day. Her song broke off suddenly. Jorindel turned, and his blood ran cold. Jorinda was gone. In her place perched a small nightingale, singing her last mournful note, "Jug, jug." An owl with burning eyes flew 3 times around them, crying out, "Too-hoo, too-hoo, too-hoo." Jorindel tried to move, to cry out, but he was frozen like stone. The sun dipped below the horizon. Darkness swept through the forest. The owl vanished into a bush, and from it stepped the old fairy herself, pale, wrinkled, and terrible to behold. She muttered strange words, snatched up the nightingale, and disappeared into the castle. Jorindel could only stand helpless, staring after her. Then, at last, she returned, chanting in a harsh voice, "Till the prisoner is fast, and her doom is cast, there stay. Oh, stay, when the charm is around her, and the spell has bound her, hie away, away!" The moment she vanished again, the spell broke. Jorindel could move once more. He fell to his knees, begging the fairy to give him back his dear Jorinda. But she only laughed cruelly and said, "You will never see her again." Then she disappeared into the shadows. Jorindel wept bitterly. He could not bear to go home without her, so he wandered to a far-off village and lived as a humble shepherd. Still, every day, he would walk near the edges of the dark forest, staring toward the castle. but he never saw or heard any sign of Jorinda. One night, he dreamed a dream. In it, he found a beautiful purple flower, and in the heart of the flower lay a single shining pearl. He dreamed that when he touched things with this flower, they lost all enchantment. Spells melted away, and at last he found Jorinda again. When Jorindel awoke, he remembered the dream and decided to search for that flower. For 8 long days he searched across hills and valleys. Then, at dawn on the 9th day, he saw it, a radiant purple flower glistening with a dewdrop as large as a pearl. He plucked it carefully and set off toward the castle. As he came near, his heart pounded. But this time something was different. He could walk freely, even within 100 paces. He touched the heavy door with the flower and creak! It opened. Inside he heard the sweet but sorrowful singing of hundreds of birds. He followed the sound until he came to a great chamber, where the fairy sat among her 700 cages. When she saw Jorindel, her face twisted with rage. She screamed and rushed toward him, but could not come within 2 yards. The flower's power held her back. Jorindel looked desperately at the cages. So many nightingales, which one was Jorinda? Just then he saw the fairy snatch up one of the cages and hurry for the door. He chased her down, touched the cage with the flower, and in an instant Jorinda stood before him again, her arms flung around his neck, as beautiful as ever. Jorindel then touched each of the other cages. One by one the birds became maidens once more, freed from their enchantment. Jorinda and Jorindel returned home together and soon were married. They lived in peace and joy for many years, and so did many others, who had once been trapped in the old fairy's castle, singing sadly in cages until love and courage set them free. And from that day on, no one ever heard the owl cry too-hoo in that forest again. The end. The Travelling Musicians by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, an honest farmer had an old donkey who had been a faithful servant for many years. But now the donkey was growing old and weak and could no longer do as much work as before. His master, tired of keeping him, began to think of putting an end to him. But the donkey, sensing trouble, quietly slipped away and began a journey toward the great city. Perhaps, he thought, I can become a musician there. After travelling a while, the donkey came across a dog lying by the roadside, panting with exhaustion. "What makes you pant so, my friend?" asked the donkey. "Alas," said the dog, "my master was going to knock me on the head because I'm old and can no longer hunt. I ran away, but now I don't know how I'll earn my living." "Well," said the donkey, "I'm going to the city to become a musician. Why don't you come with me? Maybe we can make music together." The dog agreed, and the two set off side by side. Before long they met a cat sitting in the middle of the road, looking terribly sad. "My good lady," said the donkey, "what's the matter? You look quite out of spirits." "Ah, me," sighed the cat. "I'm growing old and I'd rather nap by the fire than chase mice. My mistress wanted to drown me, so I ran away. But what will I do now?" "Oh, come with us," said the donkey. "You're a fine night singer. You could join our band." The cat was pleased and joined the travellers. A little farther on they came to a farmyard, where a rooster stood upon a gate, crowing with all his might. "Bravo," said the donkey. "You make quite the sound. What's all the fuss about?" "I was just telling everyone that tomorrow will be fine weather," said the rooster. "But my mistress and the cook plan to cut off my head tomorrow and make broth for Sunday's guests." "Heaven forbid," said the donkey. "Come with us, Master Chanticleer. Better to make music than end up in a pot." "With all my heart," said the rooster. And off the 4 new friends went, cheerful and full of hope. They travelled all day, but couldn't reach the city by nightfall, so they stopped in a dark forest to rest. The donkey and dog settled beneath a large tree. The cat climbed into its branches, and the rooster flew up to the very top. Before falling asleep, the rooster looked around and spotted a faint light in the distance. "There must be a house nearby," he called down. "If that's true," said the donkey, "let's move. Our lodging isn't exactly comfortable." "And," added the dog, "a bone or two wouldn't hurt." So they followed the light until they came upon a house glowing warm and bright. Inside, a band of robbers were feasting around a table filled with food and drink. "What do you see, donkey?" whispered the rooster. "I see a fine table of food and robbers making merry," said the donkey. "That would make a noble lodging for us," said the rooster. "Yes," said the donkey, "if only we could get in." They thought and thought until they came up with a plan. The donkey stood on his hind legs with his 4 feet against the window. The dog climbed onto his back. The cat perched upon the dog's shoulders, and the rooster flew up to the cat's head. At a signal, they began their music. The donkey brayed, the dog barked, the cat meowed, and the rooster crowed. Then, crash! They burst through the window together in a storm of sound and shattered glass. The robbers, terrified by the horrible noise, thought monsters had attacked them and ran into the woods as fast as they could. Once the coast was clear, the 4 friends eagerly sat down to the table and ate everything the robbers had left behind. When they were full, they blew out the candles and each found a sleeping spot. The donkey lay on straw in the yard. The dog curled up behind the door. The cat nestled by the warm ashes on the hearth. The rooster perched high on a beam. They soon fell into a deep, happy sleep. Around midnight, one of the robbers crept back to see what had happened. Finding the house dark and quiet, he sneaked into the kitchen to light a candle. But when he saw the cat's glowing eyes in the dark, he thought they were live coals and tried to light his match from them. The cat, furious, sprang at his face, spitting and scratching. The robber stumbled back toward the door, where the dog leapt up and bit his leg. As he ran through the yard, the donkey gave him a mighty kick, and from above, the rooster crowed with all his might. Terrified, the robber fled back to his comrades. "There's a witch in the house!" he gasped. "She scratched me with her claws, a man stabbed me in the leg, a black monster hit me with a club, and the devil himself shouted from the roof." From that night on, the robbers never dared go near the house again. The 4 musicians liked their new home so much that they decided to stay there forever. And if you ever wander near that forest, you might still hear them singing together. The donkey, the dog, the cat, and the rooster, making music under the moonlight. The end. Old Sultan. There was once a shepherd who had a faithful dog named Sultan. For many years Sultan had served his master well, but now he had grown very old and had lost all his teeth. One day, as the shepherd and his wife stood together outside their home, the shepherd said, "Tomorrow morning I'll have to shoot old Sultan. He's of no use now." His wife looked at him sadly and replied, "Oh, please let the poor faithful creature live. He served us so well for so many years. We ought to give him comfort for the rest of his days." But the shepherd shook his head. "What can we do with him? He has no teeth, and thieves aren't afraid of him anymore. True, he's served us well, but only to earn his keep. Tomorrow will be his last day, depend on it." Poor Sultan, who was lying nearby, heard every word. His heart filled with fear at the thought that tomorrow might be his final day. That evening, he went into the woods to visit his old friend, the wolf, and told him everything, how his master planned to kill him. The wolf listened and said, "Don't worry, my friend. I'll give you some good advice. Tomorrow morning your master will go to the fields with his wife, and they'll take their little child along. They usually lay the child down behind the hedge while they work. You lie close to the baby and pretend to be watching it. I'll come out of the woods and run away with the child. You chase me, bark loudly, and I'll let it go. Then you can bring the baby back, and your master will believe you've saved it. He'll be so grateful. He'll take care of you for the rest of your life." Sultan thought this was an excellent plan, And the next morning everything happened just as the wolf had said. The wolf ran off with the child. The shepherd and his wife screamed in terror, but old Sultan sprang into action, chased after the wolf, and soon caught up. The wolf dropped the baby, and Sultan gently carried it back to his master and mistress. The shepherd was overjoyed. He patted Sultan's head and said, "Old Sultan has saved our child from the wolf. From this day on, he shall live well, be cared for, and have all he needs. Wife, go home and give him a fine dinner, and let him sleep on my old cushion for the rest of his days." From that moment, Sultan had everything he could wish for. Soon after, the wolf came to visit him and said, "Well, my friend, you must keep your word. Don't tell anyone about what we did, and when I come for one of your master's fat sheep, turn your head the other way." But Sultan said firmly, "No, I'll stay true to my master." The wolf thought he was joking, but one night when he came to steal a sheep, Sultan warned the shepherd, who waited behind the barn door with a stout club. When the wolf came prowling, the shepherd beat him soundly until he barely escaped with his fur intact. The wolf was furious. "You old rogue," he shouted, "you'll regret this. I'll have my revenge." The next morning, the wolf sent the wild boar to challenge Sultan to a fight in the woods. Sultan had no one to help him except the shepherd's old three-legged cat, so he asked her to come along. Though she limped with every step, she held her tail straight up in the air. Meanwhile, the wolf and the boar arrived first. When they saw Sultan and the cat coming, they grew nervous. The cat's tail looked so sharp and straight they thought it was a sword, and every time she limped they thought she was bending down to pick up a stone to throw. "This doesn't look good," said the boar, so he hid behind a bush while the wolf climbed up into a tree. When Sultan and the cat reached the clearing, they looked around in confusion. No one was there, but the boar hadn't hidden very well, and his ears stuck out of the bush. The cat spotted one of them twitch, and thinking it was a mouse, pounced and bit it hard. The boar leapt up with a loud grunt and ran away, squealing, "Look up in the tree!" "That's the one you want." Sultan looked up and saw the wolf trembling among the branches. "Cowardly rascal!" cried Sultan. The wolf was so ashamed that he climbed down, apologized, and promised to be friends with old Sultan once more. And from that day on, they lived in peace again. The end. The Straw, the Coal, and the Bean. Once upon a time, in a quiet little village, there lived a poor old woman. One day she gathered together a small dish of beans and decided to cook them for her supper. She built a fire on her hearth, and to make it burn faster, she lit it with a handful of straw. As she poured the beans into the pan, one slipped away without her noticing. It rolled onto the floor and landed beside a single piece of straw. A moment later, a glowing coal leapt from the fire and came to rest near them both. The straw was the first to speak. "Dear friends," she said, "where have you come from?" The coal crackled and replied, "I escaped from the fire by sheer luck. If I hadn't jumped out, I would have burned to ashes." The bean added, "I too escaped with my skin intact. If that old woman had thrown me into the pot, I'd have been boiled into broth, just like all my poor companions." "And do you think I had it better?" said the straw. "The old woman burned all my brothers in smoke and flame, 60 at once. She grabbed them in handfuls, and I only just slipped through her fingers." The three of them sat in silence for a moment, thinking of their narrow escapes. Then the coal asked, "What shall we do now?" The bean thought for a moment and said, "Since we've all escaped death, we should stay together like good friends. Let's travel far away from here before misfortune finds us again." The others agreed at once, and so they set off together, the straw, the coal, and the bean. 3 unlikely companions on a small adventure. After some time they came to a little brook. There was no bridge and no plank across it, and they stood wondering how they might get to the other side. Then the straw had an idea. "I'll lay myself across," she said proudly. "You can walk over me like a bridge." The straw stretched herself across the water from one bank to the other. The coal, being bold and full of energy, stepped onto the straw and began to cross. But when she reached the middle and heard the water rushing below, she suddenly grew afraid. She froze, trembling on the bridge. Then the straw, weakened by the heat of the coal, began to smoulder. With a soft crackle, she broke in two and fell into the stream. The coal tumbled in after her, hissed as she hit the cold water, and went out forever. The bean, who had wisely stayed behind on the shore, couldn't help it. She laughed. She laughed so hard at the sight of her friend's misfortune that she burst apart. It might have been the end for her too, if not for a kind tailor passing by. He sat down by the brook to rest, saw the poor split bean, and having a gentle heart, took out his needle and thread. He carefully sewed her back together. The bean thanked him most sweetly, but since the tailor only had black thread, she was left with a dark seam, and ever since that day all beans have had a little black line, reminding us of the straw, the coal, and the bean who once set out on an adventure together. The end. Briar Rose, a bedtime retelling of the Grimm brothers' tale. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a king and queen. They had everything: riches, fine clothes, grand feasts, and a royal carriage to ride in each day. But one thing was missing. They had no child. This saddened them deeply. One day, as the queen was walking beside the river at the edge of the royal gardens, she noticed a small fish struggling on the bank. It had leapt out of the water and was gasping for breath. The queen took pity on it, gently lifted it up, and placed it back into the river. Before swimming away, the little fish lifted its head above the water and said, "I know what your heart wishes for, and your kindness will be rewarded. You shall soon have a daughter," and so it came to pass. The queen gave birth to a baby girl, so beautiful that the king could not stop gazing at her. To celebrate, he planned a grand feast to show the child to the entire kingdom. The queen said, "Let us invite the fairies as well, so they may bless our little one." Now there were 13 fairies in the land, but the palace had only 12 golden dishes for them to dine from. So, sadly, one fairy was left uninvited. When the day of the feast arrived, 12 fairies came, each dressed splendidly with red caps, high-heeled red shoes, and long white wands. After the feast, they gathered around the cradle to bless the princess. Each fairy gave her a gift. One blessed her with goodness, another with beauty, another with riches, and so on, until 11 had spoken. Just then, a great noise was heard in the courtyard. The 13th fairy had arrived. Uninvited, she wore a black cap and shoes and carried a broomstick. Anger burned in her eyes as she entered the hall. She scolded the king and queen for leaving her out and, in her fury, cried out, "The king's daughter shall, in her 15th year, prick her finger on a spindle and fall down dead." A gasp swept through the room, but before anyone could speak, the 12th fairy, who had not yet given her blessing, stepped forward. "Her fate cannot be undone," she said softly, "but it can be softened. She shall not die, only fall into a deep sleep for 100 years. The king, desperate to protect his daughter, ordered that all spindles in the kingdom be gathered and burned. Years passed. The princess grew up blessed with every good gift, grace, wisdom, and kindness. All who saw her loved her. Then came her 15th birthday. The king and queen were away from the palace, and the princess wandered through the halls, exploring room after room until she came to an old tower. At the top was a small door with a golden key. She turned it and stepped inside. There sat an old woman, spinning busily at her wheel. "Good day, old mother," said the princess. "What are you doing?" "Spinning, my dear," said the woman, nodding as the wheel hummed softly. The princess watched, fascinated. "How prettily that little thing turns," she said, reaching out to try. But as soon as she touched the spindle, the prophecy came true. She pricked her finger and fell to the floor, fast asleep. At that very moment, the king, the queen, and everyone in the palace fell asleep too. The horses in the stable, the dogs in the courtyard, even the pigeons on the roof, all slept. The fire stopped blazing. The cook froze mid-motion. The butler fell asleep with his jug of ale still raised to his lips. The entire kingdom grew silent. Then, slowly, a great hedge of thorns began to grow around the palace. Year after year, it thickened until the castle disappeared entirely. But the tale of Briar Rose, the sleeping princess, spread across the land. Many brave princes came to break through the thorny hedge, yet none succeeded. They were caught fast and perished there. At last, after 100 years had passed, a young prince heard the story from an old man. "Many have tried," said the man. "None have returned. They say a beautiful princess lies sleeping there with her whole court." But the prince was not afraid. "I will go and see her for myself," he said. And as fate would have it, that very day marked the end of the 100 years. When the prince reached the hedge, it had blossomed into a wall of roses and opened before him. He passed through easily and found the palace still and silent. The horses slept in their stalls, the dogs lay still, even the flies on the walls did not stir. He climbed the tower stairs and opened the door to the little room. There lay Briar Rose, as radiant as ever, asleep upon a couch by the window. The prince gazed at her beauty, then bent down and kissed her. At that moment, she opened her eyes and smiled, and as if the castle itself had been waiting for her awakening, life stirred once more. The king and queen awoke. The servants bustled, the fire blazed, the pigeons took flight, and the cook at last gave the kitchen boy the long-promised box on the ear. Soon after, Briar Rose and the prince were married in a grand celebration, and from that day forward they lived together happily ever after. The end. The Dog and the Sparrow. A shepherd's dog had a master who took no care of him and often let him suffer the greatest hunger. At last the poor dog could bear it no longer, so he took to his heels and ran away, feeling very sad and sorrowful. On the road he met a sparrow who asked, "Why are you so sad, my friend?" "Because," said the dog, "I am very, very hungry and have nothing to eat." "If that's all," replied the sparrow kindly, "come with me into the next town. I'll soon find you plenty of food." So off they went together into the town. As they passed a butcher's shop, the sparrow said, "Stand here a moment while I peck down a piece of meat for you." The sparrow perched upon a shelf, looked carefully around to make sure no one was watching, and pecked at a steak that lay near the edge. At last, down it fell. The dog quickly snapped it up and carried it off into a corner, where he ate it all. "Well," said the sparrow, "you shall have more if you wish. Come with me to the next shop and I'll peck down another piece." When the dog had eaten that one too, the sparrow asked, "Well, my good friend, have you had enough now?" "I've had plenty of meat," answered the dog, "but I'd like a piece of bread to eat after it." "Come with me then," said the sparrow, "and you shall soon have that too." She led him to a baker's shop and pecked at 2 rolls that lay in the window until they fell to the ground. The dog ate them eagerly, and when he still wished for more, she took him to another shop and did the same. When at last he was full, he said, "I've had enough. Now let's take a walk a little way out of town." So they both went out along the high road, but as the weather was warm, the dog said after a while, "I'm very tired. I'd like to take a nap." "Very well," said the sparrow. "Do so, and I'll perch upon that bush." So the dog stretched himself out on the road and soon fell fast asleep. While he slept, a carter came by with a cart drawn by 3 horses and loaded with 2 large casks of wine. The sparrow saw that the man wasn't turning aside but meant to drive right over the dog. She called out, "Stop! Stop, Mr. Carter, or it shall be the worse for you!" But the carter only grumbled, "You'll make it worse for me. What can you do?" And he cracked his whip, driving his cart right over the poor dog. The wheels crushed him to death. "There now, you cruel villain!" cried the sparrow. "You've killed my friend! This deed shall cost you all that you are worth." "Do your worst," said the man. "What harm can a tiny bird do me?" He drove on. But the sparrow crept beneath the cart's cover and pecked at the bung of one cask until she loosened it. The wine began to run out without the carter noticing. When at last he looked back and saw that the cask was empty, he cried, "What an unlucky wretch I am!" "Not unlucky enough yet," called the sparrow, flying to the head of one of his horses and pecking at it until the poor creature reared up and kicked. The carter, furious, grabbed his hatchet and swung at the bird, but she flew away, and his blow fell upon the horse's head, killing it instantly. "Unlucky wretch that I am," cried the carter. "Not unlucky enough yet," said the sparrow, and she flew back beneath the cart to peck out the bung of the second cask. Soon all the wine was gone. When the carter saw it, he groaned again, but the sparrow only answered, "Not unlucky enough yet." She perched on the head of his second horse and began to peck. The carter struck again, and missing her once more, killed his second horse. The sparrow taunted, "Still not unlucky enough?" And when he struck at her a third time, he killed his last horse too. At last the man trudged home in rage and despair. When he arrived, his wife met him crying, "Oh, husband, what ill luck! A wicked bird has come into the house and brought all the birds in the world with her. They're in the loft eating up all our corn." The carter rushed upstairs and indeed saw thousands of birds feasting on his grain, with the sparrow at their head. "Unlucky wretch that I am," cried the man. "Not unlucky enough yet," chirped the sparrow. "Your cruelty shall cost you your life." Then she flew out the window. Down in the kitchen, the carter sat sulking in the chimney corner, but the sparrow perched outside and called through the window, "Carter, thy cruelty shall cost thee thy life." The carter jumped up in fury and threw his hatchet, but it missed and shattered the window. The sparrow hopped inside and cried again, "Carter, it shall cost thee thy life." Mad with rage, he swung again and again, smashing furniture, dishes, chairs, and even the walls, trying to strike her, but hitting nothing. At last they caught her. "Shall I kill her at once?" asked the wife. "No," said the carter. "That's letting her off too easily. I will eat her." But the sparrow fluttered her wings and cried, "Carter, it shall cost thee thy life yet." The man handed the hatchet to his wife. "Wife, strike the bird and kill her in my hand." The wife swung the hatchet, but missed. She struck her husband instead, and he fell dead on the spot. The sparrow flew quietly home to her nest. The end. The 12 Dancing Princesses. Once upon a time there was a king who had 12 beautiful daughters. They all slept in 12 beds, lined up in one grand room. Each night the doors were shut and locked, but every morning their shoes were found worn through, as if they had danced all night long. No one could discover how it happened or where they went, so the king made a proclamation throughout the land. Whoever could uncover the secret of where his daughters danced at night would be rewarded. He could marry whichever princess he liked best and would become king after the old king's death. But if anyone tried and failed after 3 nights, he would lose his life. Many princes came to try their luck. They were welcomed warmly, given fine rooms next to the princesses, and told to keep watch. But every single one fell fast asleep, and by morning the princess's shoes were again worn through. After the 3rd night the unlucky suitor would lose his head. So it went, time after time. Now it happened that a soldier, wounded in battle and unable to fight any longer, was wandering through the kingdom. As he walked through a forest, he met an old woman who asked, "Where are you going, my good man?" "I hardly know," said the soldier, "but I've heard of the king's challenge. Perhaps I'll try my luck and maybe win a princess." The old woman smiled. "That's not so hard if you know what to do. Take my advice. Don't drink the wine one of the princesses will offer you. Pretend to sleep and you'll see what happens." Then she handed him a cloak. "When you wear this," she said, "you'll be invisible. You can follow them wherever they go." Grateful for her help, the soldier went straight to the king and offered to take on the task. That evening, the soldier was given royal robes and led to his chamber beside the princess's room. Soon the eldest daughter brought him a golden cup of wine, but remembering the old woman's words, he secretly poured it out and lay down as though he were drifting into a deep sleep. Before long, his snoring echoed through the chamber. The princesses giggled. "This one's no different from the rest," said the eldest. They hurried to their chests, took out their fine gowns, and dressed themselves before the mirror. Their jewels sparkled like starlight. But the youngest princess frowned. "I don't know why, but I feel uneasy. Something isn't right." "Oh, nonsense," said the eldest. "You're always afraid. Have you forgotten how many princes have failed before? And even if this soldier hadn't drunk his wine, he'd be fast asleep by now." When they were ready, the eldest approached her bed and clapped her hands. Instantly the bed sank into the floor, revealing a trapdoor beneath. One by one, the princesses descended the hidden stairs, eldest first. The soldier sprang up, threw on the invisible cloak, and followed. But halfway down, he accidentally stepped on the youngest princess's gown. "Someone took hold of my dress," she whispered, trembling. "Just a nail in the wall," said the eldest quickly. At the bottom of the stairs, they entered a shimmering grove where all the leaves on the trees were made of silver. They glittered and chimed softly as the sisters passed beneath them. The soldier broke off a small branch to keep as proof. A loud crack echoed through the grove. The youngest gasped, "Did you hear that? That's never happened before." "It's only our princes cheering for us," said the eldest. Soon they came to a second grove where the leaves were of gold, and then a third where they sparkled like diamonds. Each time the soldier broke a branch, and each time the youngest grew more fearful, but her sisters only laughed. Beyond the groves lay a great lake. On the shore waited 12 small boats, each rowed by a handsome prince. The princesses stepped into the boats, and the soldier slipped into the same one as the youngest. The prince rowing her boat said, "I don't know why, but the boat feels so heavy tonight." "It must be the warm air," she said lightly, though she glanced around uneasily. On the far side of the lake rose a shining castle. Music drifted out, horns, drums, and sweet laughter. Inside, candles blazed, and the floor shimmered like glass. Each princess danced with her prince. The invisible soldier danced too, unseen among them, and whenever a cup of wine was poured, he drank it dry before it reached their lips. The youngest trembled. "Someone's here," she whispered, but again the eldest silenced her. They danced until 3 o'clock in the morning. Their shoes were worn to ribbons, and the princes rowed them back across the lake. This time the soldier slipped into the eldest's boat. When they reached their room, he ran ahead, lay down on his bed, and began to snore. The sisters, exhausted, changed out of their gowns and fell fast asleep. The same thing happened again the next night, and the next. Each time the soldier followed them through the groves of silver, gold, and diamonds. On the third night he carried away one of the golden cups from the castle as final proof. When the 3 nights were over, he was brought before the king. The 12 princesses stood behind the door, listening anxiously. "Well," said the king, "where do my daughters go at night?" The soldier bowed and answered, "They dance with 12 princes in a castle beneath the ground." He showed the king the silver, gold, and diamond branches, and the golden cup. When the king called his daughters in, they could deny it no longer. They confessed everything. The king then asked the soldier which of his daughters he wished to marry. He smiled and said, "I am not a young man, so I will choose the eldest." And that very day they were married. The soldier became the king's heir, and the secret of the 12 dancing princesses was never hidden again. The end. The Fisherman and His Wife. Once upon a time there was a fisherman who lived with his wife in a small, shabby pigsty by the seaside. Every day the fisherman went out to fish, sitting by the sparkling waves and watching his line drift in the water. One day, as he sat there quietly, his float suddenly disappeared beneath the waves. With a firm pull, he drew up a great fish. But to his surprise, the fish spoke. "Please let me live," said the fish. "I'm not a real fish, but an enchanted prince. Put me back into the water and let me go." "Oh ho," said the fisherman. "You needn't say so many words about it. I'll have nothing to do with a fish that can talk. Swim away, sir, as soon as you please." And with that he let the fish go. It darted down into the depths, leaving behind a long streak of red on the waves. When the fisherman returned home, he told his wife what had happened, how he had caught a great fish that could talk and claimed to be an enchanted prince, and how he'd let it go. "Didn't you ask it for anything?" cried his wife. "We live so miserably here in this dirty pigsty. Go back and tell the fish we'd like a snug little cottage." The fisherman didn't much like the idea. Still, he went back to the shore. This time the sea looked yellow and green. He stood at the edge and called out, "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife Ilsebil will have her own will, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." The fish swam up and asked, "Well, what is her will? What does your wife want?" "My wife," said the fisherman, "doesn't like living in a pigsty any more. She wants a little cottage." "Go home," said the fish. "She's already in it." Sure enough, when he returned, there stood his wife at the door of a neat little cottage. come in," said she. "Isn't this much better than that filthy pigsty?" Inside was a cosy parlour, a bedchamber, a kitchen, and behind the house a small garden with flowers and fruit trees. There was even a courtyard full of ducks and chickens. "Ah," said the fisherman, "how happily we shall live now." "We'll try to," said his wife. For a week or two everything went well, but soon Dame Ilsebil said, "Husband, there isn't nearly enough room here. The garden and courtyard are too small. I want a large stone castle. Go ask the fish again." "Wife," said the fisherman, "I don't like to go back. He might be angry. We ought to be content with this pretty cottage." "Nonsense," said she. "He'll do it willingly, I'm sure. Go along and ask." The fisherman sighed and went again. The sea looked blue and gloomy, though calm. He called out, "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife Ilsebil will have her own will, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." "What does she want now?" asked the fish. "My wife wants to live in a stone castle," said the man. "Go home," said the fish. "She's standing at the gate already." And there she was, before a grand castle with tall towers, servants bustling about, and golden tables and chairs. "Well," said the fisherman, "now we'll live happy forever." "Perhaps," said his wife. "Let's sleep on it first." The next morning, Dame Ilsebil awoke and nudged her husband. "Get up, husband! We must be king of all the land." "Wife," said the man, "why should we wish to be king?" "I will not be king." "Then I will," said she. "Go to the fish." Sadly the fisherman went once more. The sea was now dark grey and restless with curling waves. "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife Ilsebil will have her own will, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." "Well, what would she have now?" asked the fish. "My wife wants to be king," said the fisherman. "Go home," said the fish. "She is king already." And when he returned, soldiers marched, drums rolled, and his wife sat upon a golden throne, crowned and majestic. But even as queen she was not content. "I am king," she said, "but I think I should like to be emperor." "Wife," cried the fisherman, "why wish for more? Surely the fish cannot make an emperor." "I am king," said she, "and you are my slave. Go and ask." This time the sea was black and rough. A mighty wind blew, and the fisherman trembled as he called, "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife Ilsebil will have her own will, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." "What would she have now?" asked the fish. "She wants to be emperor," whispered the man. "Go home," said the fish. "She is emperor already." At home his wife sat on a golden throne higher than any before, surrounded by giants, princes and dukes. Still she wasn't satisfied. "Husband," said she, "I will be pope next." "Wife, wife," said he, "how can you be pope? There is only one pope in Christendom." "Nonsense," said she. "If he can make me emperor, he can make me pope. Go and ask." The fisherman went once more. The sky was blood red and the waves boiled. Lightning flashed, thunder rolled, and ships tossed wildly. Still he called, "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife Ilsebil will have her own will, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." "What does she want now?" said the fish. "My wife wants to be pope," said the man. "Go home," said the fish. "She is pope already." When he arrived, his wife sat upon a throne 2 miles high, crowned with 3 great crowns, surrounded by blazing lights of every size. "Wife," said he softly, "are you pope now?" "Yes," said she. "Then you can be nothing greater." "I'll think about that," said she. But that night she could not sleep. As dawn broke and the sun rose over the sea, she thought bitterly, "After all, I cannot make the sun rise." She woke her husband. "Go to the fish. Tell him I must be lord of the sun and moon." "Husband, go at once," she cried. The poor fisherman went trembling to the shore. The storm was raging now. Trees shook, rocks cracked, and waves rose like mountains. He called out one last time, "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife Ilsebil will have her own will, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." "What does she want now?" asked the fish. "She wants to be lord of the sun and moon," said he. "Go home," said the fish, "to your pigsty again." And there they live to this very day. The end. The Willow-Wren and the Bear. One warm summer day, a bear and a wolf were wandering through the forest together. As they walked, the bear heard a bird singing so beautifully that he stopped and said, "Brother Wolf, what bird is it that sings so sweetly?" "That," replied the wolf, "is the king of birds, the one before whom all others must bow." But in truth, it was only the willow-wren. "If that's so," said the bear, "then I should like to see his royal palace." "Take me there." The wolf shook his head. "Not so fast," he said. "You must wait until the queen arrives." Soon after, the queen came flying by with food in her beak, and the king followed behind. Together they fed their tiny chicks in a little nest hidden among the branches. The bear wanted to go closer at once, but the wolf held him back. "Wait until the royal pair fly away," he whispered. When the birds were gone, the bear peeked into the nest. He saw 5 or 6 tiny, fluffy chicks inside. "So this is the royal palace," he grumbled. "It's nothing but a hole in a tree. And you," he sneered at the chicks, "you're no king's children, you're disreputable brats." The young wrens puffed up their feathers in fury. "No, we are not," they chirped. "Our parents are honest and noble. You'll pay for that insult, bear." The bear and the wolf hurried away, uneasy. But when the willow-wren parents returned, their chicks refused to eat. "We won't touch a thing," they cried, "not even a fly's leg, until you punish the bear for calling us dishonourable." The king fluttered his wings. "Be easy, my children," he said. "Justice will be done." He flew straight to the bear's cave and called, "Old growler, why have you insulted my children? You shall pay for this. We declare war." And so war was declared. All the four-footed creatures of the land were summoned: oxen, asses, deer, cows, and every beast that roamed the earth. And the willow-wren called upon the skies, every bird from the tiniest midge to the mightiest eagle, and even hornets, bees, and flies came to join the cause. Before the battle began, the willow-wren sent spies to discover who led the enemy. The clever gnat took on the task, flying quietly into the forest where the animals were gathering. She hid under a leaf near where the password would be announced. There stood the bear, calling the fox before him. "Fox," said the bear, "you are the craftiest of all creatures. You shall be our general." "Very well," said the fox, flicking his tail proudly. "But what shall be the signal?" After some thought, the fox said, "My tail is long and bushy like a red feathered plume. When I hold it high, you'll know all is well and you must charge forward. But if I lower it, run. Run for your lives." The gnat heard every word and flew swiftly to tell the willow-wren. When dawn broke, the battle began. The ground trembled as the animals charged. The air buzzed and whirred with wings as the birds swooped down like a storm. The willow-wren gave one quiet command: "Send the hornet. He knows what to do." The hornet darted straight toward the fox and nestled beneath his tail. Then, sting! The fox winced but held his tail high. Sting! Again, the fox twitched, his tail wavered. A third sting made him shriek and drop his tail between his legs. When the animals saw the signal fall, they panicked. "All is lost," they cried, and every one of them fled into burrows, caves, and thickets. The birds had won the war. The willow-wren king and queen flew home triumphant. "Children, rejoice," they sang. "Eat and drink, for we have won." But the chicks refused again. "Not until the bear comes and begs our pardon," they said, "and admits that we are honourable children." So the willow-wren flew once more to the bear's cave. "Growler," he called, "come to the nest and apologise, or every rib in your body shall be broken." The bear, trembling, crept out and stammered his apology to the tiny birds. Only then did the young wrens forgive him. They feasted joyfully, chirping and laughing late into the night. The tiniest victors of the greatest forest war ever fought. The end. The Frog Prince. One fine evening, a young princess put on her bonnet and clogs and went out to take a walk by herself in the woods. When she came to a cool spring of water that rose in the midst of it, she sat herself down to rest for a while. Now she had a golden ball in her hand, her favourite plaything, and she loved to toss it up into the air and catch it again as it fell. After a time, she threw it so high that she missed it as it came down, and the ball bounced away along the ground until at last it rolled into the spring. The princess leaned over and looked down into the water, but the spring was so deep that she could not see the bottom. She began to cry, saying, "Alas! If only I could get my ball again, I would give all my fine clothes and jewels and everything I have in the world." While she was speaking, a frog popped his head out of the water and said, "Princess, why do you weep so bitterly?" "Alas," said she, "what can you do for me, you ugly frog?" "My golden ball has fallen into the spring." The frog replied, "I want not your pearls, nor your jewels, nor your fine clothes. But if you will love me and let me live with you, eat from your golden plate, and sleep upon your bed, I will bring you your ball again." "What nonsense this silly frog is talking," thought the princess. "He could never even get out of the spring to visit me, though he may fetch my ball." So she said aloud, "Well, if you will bring me my ball, I will do all you ask." The frog put his head down, dived deep under the water, and soon came up again with the golden ball in his mouth. He placed it on the edge of the spring. Overjoyed, the princess snatched up her ball and ran home as fast as she could, never thinking another moment about the frog. Behind her he called out, "Stay, princess! Take me with you as you said!" But she did not stop to listen. The next day, just as the princess had sat down to dinner, she heard a strange noise. Tap, tap, plash, plash, as if something were climbing the marble staircase. Then came a gentle knock at the door, and a small voice cried, "Open the door, my princess dear. Open the door to thy true love here, and mind the words that thou and I said, by the fountain cool in the greenwood shade." The princess ran to the door and opened it, and there stood the frog. She had quite forgotten him. At the sight she was terribly frightened, slammed the door shut and hurried back to her seat. The king, her father, noticed and asked what was the matter. "There is a nasty frog at the door," she said. "He lifted my ball out of the spring this morning, and I told him he might live with me, thinking he could never get out of the water. But now he's here." The frog knocked again and repeated his little song. Then the king said to his daughter, "As you have given your word, you must keep it. Go and let him in." Reluctantly, she opened the door. The frog hopped into the room, tap, tap, plash, plash, across the floor until he came to the table. "Pray lift me upon your chair," said the frog, "and let me sit next to you." She did as he asked. Then he said, "Put your plate nearer to me, that I may eat from it." She obeyed, though unwillingly, and when he had eaten his fill, he said, "Now I am tired. Carry me upstairs and put me into your bed." The poor princess hesitated, but she had to keep her promise. She carried him upstairs and placed him upon the pillow of her bed, where he slept all night long. When morning came, he hopped downstairs and went out of the house. "Now then," thought the princess, "he's gone at last, and I shall be troubled with him no more." But she was mistaken. That night she heard the same tapping at the door, and again the frog sang, "Open the door, my princess dear. Open the door to thy true love here, and mind the words that thou and I said, by the fountain cool in the greenwood shade." Once more she let him in, and once more he slept upon her pillow until morning. The third night the same thing happened, but when the princess awoke in the morning, she was astonished, for instead of a frog, there stood a handsome prince gazing upon her with the kindest eyes she had ever seen. He told her that he had been enchanted by a spiteful fairy who had turned him into a frog, and that only when a princess took him out of the spring, let him eat from her plate, and sleep upon her bed for 3 nights, would the spell be broken. "You," said the prince, "have freed me from the enchantment. Now come with me into my father's kingdom, where I will marry you and love you as long as you live." The princess, overjoyed, quickly agreed. As they spoke, a splendid coach drew up before the door, with 8 beautiful horses decked in golden harness and feathered plumes. Behind it rode the prince's faithful servant, Heinrich, who had mourned his master's misfortunes so bitterly that his heart had almost burst. They took leave of the king and set out together in the shining coach, full of joy and laughter, bound for the prince's kingdom. And there they lived happily for many, many years. The end. Cat and mouse in partnership. Once upon a time, a cat made friends with a little mouse. The cat spoke so sweetly, promising love and friendship, that the mouse finally agreed they should live together and share a home. "But we must prepare for winter," said the cat wisely. "Otherwise we'll go hungry. And you, little mouse, can't wander everywhere. Someone might catch you in a trap." The mouse agreed, and together they bought a small pot of fat to keep for the cold months. But soon came a problem. Where should they hide it? After some thought, the cat said, "There's no safer place than the church. No one dares steal from there. We'll put it under the altar and touch it only when we truly need it." So they stored the pot safely away. But before long, temptation began to stir in the cat's belly. One day she said to the mouse, "My dear friend, I have something to tell you. My cousin has had a baby, and she's asked me to be the godmother. The little one is white with brown spots, and I must attend the christening." "Of course," said the mouse kindly. "Go on, and if you get something tasty to eat, think of me. I'd love a sip of sweet red wine." But the cat had no cousin, and there was no baby. She crept straight to the church, licked the top of the fat clean off the pot, and then spent the afternoon sunning herself on the rooftops, licking her lips at the thought of her secret treat. When evening came, she returned home. "Well," said the mouse, "how was the christening?" "Lovely," replied the cat. "What did they name the child?" "Top Off," said the cat coolly. "Top Off," repeated the mouse. "That's a strange name. Is it common in your family?" "Oh, nonsense," said the cat. "It's no stranger than Crumb Stealer, which is what your godchildren are called." Not long after, the cat's craving returned. "I've been asked to be godmother again," she said. "This time the baby has a white ring around its neck." I can't refuse. The good little mouse agreed to stay home and tend the house. But of course the cat went straight to the church again. She licked half the pot clean, purring, "Nothing tastes better than what one keeps for oneself." When she came home that evening, the mouse asked, "What was the new baby named?" "Half Done," said the cat. "Half Done," cried the mouse. "I've never heard such a name. It must not be in the calendar." The cat just smirked and stretched in front of the fire. A little while later, the cat began to long for the pot once more. "All good things come in threes," she purred. "I've been asked to stand godmother again." The baby is entirely black except for white paws. Such a rare sight. It happens only once every few years. "Top Off, Half Done," muttered the mouse. "These names make me uneasy." "That's because you sit at home all day," said the cat. "You think too much. I'll be back soon." The mouse tidied the house while the cat crept once more to the church and, this time, licked the pot clean. "When everything is gone, there's finally peace," she sighed happily, and only returned home when night had fallen. "Well," asked the mouse, "what name did they give this child?" "You won't like it," said the cat. "It's all gone." "All gone," gasped the mouse. "That's the strangest name of all." What could it mean? But the cat only yawned and went to bed. When winter came and food was scarce, the mouse remembered their hidden pot. "Come, friend," she said cheerfully, "let's fetch our fat from the church. It's time we enjoyed it." "Indeed," said the cat slyly. "You'll enjoy it as much as sticking your tongue out of the window." When they reached the altar, the pot was still there, but empty. "Oh, now I understand," cried the mouse. "You were no godmother at all. You were a thief. First Top Off, then Half Done, and finally—" "Be quiet," hissed the cat, her fur bristling. "One more word and I'll eat you too." But the little mouse, trembling with anger, squeaked, "All gone!" And before the word had left her lips, the cat leapt forward, pounced and swallowed her whole. And that, dear listener, is how things often go in the world. The end. The Goose-Girl. Once upon a time, in a great kingdom far away, there lived a wise king, a kind queen, and their only child, a princess as gentle as she was beautiful. When the king passed away, the queen devoted herself entirely to her daughter's care, with the help of a good fairy who loved the young princess dearly. As the princess grew, she was promised in marriage to a prince from a distant land. When the time came for her to travel to his kingdom, the queen packed many fine things for her journey: chests of jewels, gold and silver, dresses fit for a queen, and all manner of treasures. The queen also sent with her a waiting maid to serve and protect her along the way. Each had a horse, but the princess's horse was no ordinary creature. It was a gift from the fairy, a faithful steed named Falada, who could speak like a man. Before they set off, the good fairy visited the princess privately. From her own head she cut a small lock of hair and handed it to her. "Keep this close to your heart, dear child," said the fairy. "It will guard you from harm on your journey." So the princess placed the lock in her bosom, said a tearful goodbye to her mother, and began the long road toward her new life. For a while all went well, but one warm afternoon, as they rode beside a brook, the princess became very thirsty. "Please," she said kindly to her maid, "get down and bring me some water in my golden cup." "I'm so thirsty." The maid scowled. "If you're thirsty, you can get it yourself. I won't serve you any longer." Startled and frightened, the princess climbed down, knelt by the stream, and drank directly from the water, for she dared not take out her golden cup. As she bent down, she whispered sadly, "Oh, what will become of me?" And from within her gown, the fairy's lock of hair whispered back, "Alas, alas, if thy mother knew it, sadly, sadly would she rue it." The princess said nothing. She was gentle and meek, and would not scold her servant. She mounted Falada once more, and they rode on. Before long the sun grew hot again, and they reached another stream. Forgetting her maid's cruelty, the princess asked once more, "Please fetch me some water to drink." But the maid replied more harshly than before, "Drink for yourself. I'm no longer your servant." The princess climbed down again, tears falling as she drank from the river. "Oh, what will become of me?" she whispered. And again the lock of hair answered, "Alas, alas, if thy mother knew it, sadly, sadly would she rue it." But this time, as she leaned down to drink, the little lock slipped from her bosom and floated away with the current. She didn't see it, but the maid did. And knowing its magic was gone, the maid smiled wickedly. Now the princess had no power to defend herself. The false maid ordered her to change clothes, taking the royal garments for herself and forcing the princess to wear the maid's shabby ones. Then she made her give up Falada, claiming him as her own. "You will ride my old horse," the maid said coldly, "and if you tell anyone what happened, I'll kill you." At last they reached the prince's kingdom. There was great celebration at their arrival, and the prince himself came out to meet them. Seeing the maid dressed as a princess, he lifted her from the horse and led her to the palace, believing she was his bride. The true princess was left behind in the courtyard. Now the old king, the prince's father, was sitting at his kitchen window when he noticed the girl standing below. She looked far too graceful and delicate to be a servant. So he went upstairs and asked the supposed bride, "Who is the young woman you brought with you, standing alone in the courtyard?" "Oh, her," said the false bride lightly. "She's just a maid I brought along for company. You may find her some work so she's not idle." The old king nodded and thought for a while. "Very well," he said. "She may help my boy Curdken take care of the geese." And so the true princess became the Goose-Girl. But the false bride was afraid that Falada, the talking horse, might reveal the truth. So she said to the prince, "Dear husband, please have the horse I rode killed. He was so wild and troublesome on the road, I never wished to see him again." The prince, thinking only to please her, agreed. When the true princess heard this, she wept bitterly. She went to the man who was to do the deed and begged, "Please, when you've cut off Falada's head, nail it beneath the great dark gate where I pass each morning and evening. That way I can still see him sometimes." The man took pity on her and did as she asked. Each morning, as the princess and Curdken passed beneath the dark gate, she would whisper sadly, "Falada, Falada, there thou hangest. And the horse's head would answer, "Bride, bride, there thou gangest. Alas, alas! If thy mother knew it, sadly, sadly would she rue it." Then they went out to the meadow to watch the geese. When the sun shone bright, the princess would sit upon a grassy bank and let down her silver hair, which gleamed like sunlight on water. Curdken would stare enchanted and reach to pluck a strand, but she would chant, "Blow, breezes, blow. Let Curdken's hat go, blow, breezes, blow. Let him after it go, o'er hills, dales and rocks, away be it whirled, till the silvery locks are all combed and curled." Then a strong wind would rush across the field, blowing Curdken's hat far away. He would have to chase after it, tumbling over the hills until she had finished braiding her shining hair. The next day, the same thing happened again and again. Frustrated, Curdken went to the old king. "I can't work with that strange girl any longer," he said. "She talks to a horse's head at the gate, and strange winds blow whenever she combs her hair." The old king was intrigued. The next morning he hid himself by the gate and heard the girl speak to Falada, and Falada answer her. Later he followed her to the meadow and saw for himself how the wind obeyed her chant. When the Goose-Girl returned that evening, the old king called her into his chamber and said gently, "Tell me, my child, why do you do such things?" Tears filled her eyes. "I cannot tell you, or I shall lose my life." But the king spoke kindly and urged her until she told him everything, from the day she left home to that very moment. The old king comforted her, dressed her in royal clothes, and marvelled at her beauty. Then he called his son and said, "You have been deceived. The woman you think is your bride is only a waiting maid. The true princess stands before you." The young prince rejoiced when he saw her and heard her story. Without saying a word to the false bride, the king prepared a grand feast. The prince sat between the two women, the false bride on his left, the true one on his right. None recognized the Goose-Girl, for she now shone brighter than any jewel in the hall. After the meal, the old king said, "I will tell you a story." And he told the tale of the journey, the betrayal, and the magic hair, just as it had happened, ending with the question, what punishment would be fair for one who acted so wickedly toward her mistress? The false bride, thinking it was only a story, said coldly, "She deserves to be sealed inside a barrel lined with sharp nails and dragged through the streets until she is dead." The old king rose. "You have judged yourself," he said. And so it was done. The true princess was then married to her prince, and they ruled together with kindness and joy for all their days. The good fairy came once more to bless them and restored the faithful Falada to life, and they lived happily ever after. The end. The Adventures of Chanticleer and Partlet. "The nuts are ripe now," said Chanticleer to his wife Partlet. "Why don't we go up to the mountains and enjoy them before the squirrels take them all?" "With all my heart," said Partlet. "Let's make a day of it." So, off they went to the mountains. The weather was lovely, and they spent the whole day there, eating nuts until the sun began to set. Whether they had eaten so many that they couldn't walk or were simply too lazy, no one can say. But by evening, they decided it was far too undignified to walk home on foot. So Chanticleer began building a little carriage out of nutshells. When it was finished, Partlet hopped in proudly and said, "Now, my dear, harness yourself to it and pull me home." Chanticleer let out a laugh. "That's a funny thought. No, I'd rather walk. I'll drive the carriage if you'd like, but I won't be the one to pull it." While they were arguing, a duck came waddling up, quacking angrily. "You thieving vagabonds," she cried. "What are you doing on my land? You'll pay for this." And she flew at Chanticleer with a furious flap of her wings. But Chanticleer was no coward. He fought back with his sharp spurs until the duck finally cried for mercy. He agreed to spare her on one condition, that she would pull the carriage home. Grumbling, the duck gave in. Chanticleer climbed up to drive, and off they went at a good pace, with Partlet sitting comfortably inside. After a while they met a needle and a pin walking down the road. "Stop, stop," called the needle. "It's so dark we can hardly see where we're going, and the road's too muddy to walk. We've been at the inn a few miles back and drank longer than we should have. Would you give us a lift?" Chanticleer eyed them, thin little fellows who wouldn't take up much space. "All right," he said. "You can ride, but don't dirty the carriage wheels getting in, and don't step on Partlet's toes." By the time they reached an inn, it was late and dark. The duck was tired, and they decided to stay the night. The innkeeper was reluctant. Such an odd company of travellers didn't seem very respectable, but they spoke politely and offered him the egg Partlet had laid along the way. They even promised him the duck, who laid an egg every day. So the innkeeper let them stay, and they enjoyed a fine supper before going to bed. Before dawn, while everyone was still asleep, Chanticleer woke Partlet. Together they pecked a hole in the egg they'd given the innkeeper, ate it, and tossed the shells into the fireplace. Then they went to the needle and pin, who were still fast asleep, and stuck them, one into the innkeeper's chair and the other into his handkerchief. Quiet as shadows, they slipped away into the early light. The duck, who had slept outside, saw them leaving and quickly jumped into the brook, swimming off before they could stop her. A few hours later, the innkeeper got up. When he reached for his handkerchief, the pin pricked his hand. "Ouch!" he grumbled. Then he went to light his pipe, but when he stirred the fire, the eggshells flew into his eyes. "What is going on today?" he cried. "The world's against me." In a foul mood, he sat down in his easy chair, only to leap up again with a shout, for the needle jabbed him in a very unpleasant place. Now he was truly furious. Remembering the strange guests from the night before, he ran to check their room, but they were long gone. "Never again," he swore, "will I take in such a band of vagabonds. They eat well, pay nothing, and leave nothing behind but their tricks." One morning Chanticleer said, "Let's take another ride, my dear." So he built a handsome carriage with 4 bright red wheels and harnessed 6 mice to pull it. Once they were ready, they set off. A cat met them along the way and asked, "Where are you going?" Chanticleer replied, "All on our way, a visit to pay to Mr. Korbes, the fox, today." "Take me with you," said the cat. "With pleasure," said Chanticleer. "Climb on behind, but be careful not to fall off." Then he called out, "Take care of this handsome coach of mine, nor dirty my pretty red wheels so fine. Now mice, be ready, and wheels run steady, for we are going a visit to pay to Mr. Korbes the fox today." As they rolled along, they met a millstone, an egg, a duck, and a pin. All asked to join, and Chanticleer gladly let them aboard. When they reached Mr. Korbes's house, he wasn't home, so the mice pulled the carriage into the coach house, and everyone took a hiding place. Chanticleer and Partlet flew up to a beam, the cat crouched by the fireplace. The duck climbed into the wash basin, the pin stuck himself into the pillow, the millstone rested above the door, and the egg rolled up into the towel. Soon Mr. Korbes came home. He went to the fireplace to light a fire, but the cat threw a cloud of ashes into his face. Coughing and sputtering, he ran to the kitchen to wash up, but the duck splashed water all over him. Reaching for the towel, he found the egg, which broke and smeared yolk across his face and eyes. Furious, he stomped off to bed without supper, but when he laid his head on the pillow, the pin stuck him sharply in the cheek. Yelling in pain, he leapt up to flee the house, but as he passed through the doorway, the millstone fell straight down on his head and crushed him instantly. And so ended Mr. Korbes, whose bad temper had met its match in the strangest little party ever seen. One day, Chanticleer and Partlet went again to the mountains to gather nuts. They agreed to share them evenly between them. But when Partlet found a large, beautiful nut, she kept it to herself. Unfortunately, it was too big to swallow and it got stuck in her throat. She began to choke and gasped. "Chanticleer! Hurry, get me water or I'll die!" Chanticleer ran as fast as he could to the river. "River, please give me water," he cried. "Partlet is choking on a great nut in the mountain." The river answered, "First, go to the bride and bring me a silken cord to draw up the water." So Chanticleer ran to the bride. "Bride," he said, "please give me a silken cord, so the river will give me water for Partlet, who's choking in the mountain." The bride said, "First, fetch me my garland that hangs on the willow in the garden." Chanticleer flew to the garden, grabbed the garland and brought it to the bride. She gave him the silken cord, which he took to the river. The river then gave him water, and he raced back to Partlet. But it was too late. The poor hen had already choked and lay still. Chanticleer wept bitterly. All the animals came to mourn with him. 6 mice built a tiny hearse to carry her to her grave, and Chanticleer drove them himself. On the way, they met a fox. "Where are you going, Chanticleer?" asked the fox. "To bury my Partlet," he said. "May I come along?" asked the fox. "Yes," said Chanticleer, "but sit in the back. My little horses can't pull too much weight." The fox climbed on, and soon after came the wolf, the bear, the goat, and all the beasts of the forest, following behind. When they reached a rushing stream, Chanticleer asked, "How will we cross?" A straw said kindly, "I'll stretch myself across so you can walk over." But when the mice tried to cross, the straw slipped, and all 6 mice fell in and drowned. Then a log of wood came floating by. "I'm big enough, ya," he said. "Cross over me." But they balanced so poorly that the log rolled away, and they nearly fell in again. At last, a kind stone offered to help. "Step over me," he said. This time Chanticleer crossed safely with the hearse and carried Partlet to the other side. But the fox, the wolf, the bear, and the rest were too heavy. The stone tipped and they all tumbled into the water and were swept away. Chanticleer buried Partlet himself. He built a small mound over her and sat beside it, mourning until he could no longer bear his grief. At last his heart broke. He lay down beside her grave and never rose again. And so both were gone, and the forest was silent once more. The end. Rapunzel. There once lived a man and a woman who had long wished for a child, though their prayers had gone unanswered. One day, at last, the woman began to hope that her wish would soon come true. Behind their house was a splendid garden filled with the most beautiful flowers and herbs, but it was surrounded by a high wall and belonged to a powerful enchantress feared by all. No one dared to enter. From a small window overlooking the garden, the woman often gazed down at the lush plants. One afternoon she noticed a bed of rampion, also called Rapunzel, so green and fresh that she longed for it more than anything. Her desire grew stronger each day until she became pale and weak. Alarmed, her husband asked, "What's wrong, my love?" She replied, "If I can't taste that rampion growing in the garden behind our house, I fear I will die." The husband, who loved her deeply, thought, "Better to risk the garden than lose her." So at twilight he climbed over the wall, quickly gathered a handful of rampion and brought it home. His wife made a salad and ate it eagerly. It tasted so good that the next day she craved it 3 times as much. Once again her husband climbed the wall to fetch more, but this time he came face to face with the enchantress. "How dare you," she cried, "sneak into my garden and steal like a thief? You shall pay for this." Terrified, he stammered, "Please have mercy." "I did it out of love. My wife saw your rampion and longed for it so much she would have died without it." The enchantress's anger softened. "If that's true," she said, You may take as much as you wish, but on one condition. When your wife bears her child, you must give it to me. I will care for it as my own." In his fear, the man agreed, and when the baby was born, the enchantress appeared, named the child Rapunzel, and took her away. Rapunzel grew into a girl of stunning beauty, her hair long and golden as spun sunlight. When she was 12, the enchantress locked her in a tower deep in the forest. There were no stairs, no door, only a single window high at the top. Whenever the enchantress wanted to visit, she would stand below and call, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." At her voice, Rapunzel would unwind her shining braids, loop them around a hook, and let them fall. The enchantress would climb up the long golden rope of hair to reach her. One day, a prince was riding through the forest when he heard a song drifting from the tower. It was so beautiful that he stopped to listen, his heart moved by the sweetness of the voice. He searched for an entrance but found none. Still, the song stayed with him, and every day he returned just to hear it again. Then, one evening, hidden among the trees, he saw the enchantress approach and heard her call out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." The prince watched as the golden hair fell and the enchantress climbed up. "So that's how it's done," he thought. The next night, as dusk fell, he stepped to the foot of the tower and called out in the same way, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." The braids fell and the prince climbed up. When Rapunzel saw a man instead of her mistress, she was terrified. But the prince spoke kindly, explaining how her song had touched his heart and left him restless until he met her. Hearing his sincerity, Rapunzel lost her fear. When he asked her to be his wife, she thought, "He will love me more than old Dame Gothel ever could." She agreed and said, "I will gladly go with you, but I don't know how to get down. Bring a skein of silk each time you come. I'll weave a ladder, and when it's finished, I'll climb down, and you can take me away on your horse." They planned that he would visit each evening, since the enchantress only came by day. For a long time, they kept their secret. But one day, Rapunzel said innocently, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, why are you so much heavier to pull up than the young prince?" He climbs in an instant. "Ah, you wicked child," cried the enchantress, "so you've betrayed me!" In a fury, she seized Rapunzel's shining hair, wrapped it around her hand, snipped it off with a pair of shears, and cast poor Rapunzel into a desolate wilderness where she lived in sorrow and want. That same day, the enchantress tied the cut braids to the hook of the window. When the prince arrived and called as usual, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me," she let them fall. The prince climbed eagerly, expecting to see his beloved, but instead found the enchantress, her eyes full of malice. "So you seek your darling?" she sneered. "The pretty bird no longer sings in her nest. The cat has caught her and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you. You'll never see her again." The prince, overcome with despair, leapt from the tower. Though he survived the fall, the thorns below pierced his eyes, leaving him blind. For years he wandered through the forest, eating roots and berries, weeping for the loss of Rapunzel. At last he came upon the wilderness where she lived with the twins she had borne, a boy and a girl. When he heard her singing, the voice was so familiar that he followed it. When Rapunzel saw him, she ran to his arms, crying. 2 of her tears fell upon his eyes, and miraculously his sight was restored. Joyfully, he led her and the children back to his kingdom, where they were received with great celebration. And from that day forward, Rapunzel and the prince lived together in happiness and peace. The end. Foundling Bird. There was once a forester who spent his days tending the deep green woods that surrounded his little home. One morning, while out hunting, he heard a faint, desperate cry echoing through the trees, a sound like a frightened child. He followed the voice, weaving through branches and underbrush until he came to a tall oak tree. High in its branches sat a small boy, clinging to the trunk and crying. The forester looked up in disbelief. How could a child have gotten all the way up there? Then he noticed the flutter of feathers overhead. A large bird, perhaps an eagle, circled once and vanished into the sky. Carefully the forester climbed the tree, lifted the trembling boy into his arms and carried him down to safety. He looked into the child's eyes and whispered kindly, "You'll come home with me. My daughter Lina will have a brother today." And so he brought the boy home, naming him Fundevogel, found by bird. From that day forward, Fundevogel and Lina were inseparable. They played among the pines, gathered berries by the stream, and whispered secrets under the stars. When one laughed, the other laughed. When one cried, the other's heart broke. But not everyone in the house was kind. The forester's old cook, a woman named Sanna, had grown bitter and cruel with age. One evening, Lina saw her going back and forth to the spring, carrying bucket after bucket of water. Curious, Lina asked, "Why are you fetching so much water, old Sanna?" The cook paused, her wrinkled face twisting into a sly grin. "If you promise never to tell a soul," she said, "I'll tell you why." Lina nodded. Sanna leaned close. "Tomorrow morning when your father goes hunting, I'll boil this water, and I'll throw Fundevogel into it." Lina's eyes went wide, but she said nothing. When morning came and the forester left for the forest, she ran to Fundevogel's room and shook him awake. "Fundevogel," she whispered, "if you'll never leave me, I'll never leave you." "Never," he said. "Then listen," Lina continued. "Old Sanna means to harm you. We have to leave now." The two children dressed quickly, slipped out the door and ran into the forest as the first light of dawn touched the trees. When the water in the pot began to boil, the cook stormed into their room to fetch the boy. But the beds were empty. "Gone!" she shrieked. "They've run away!" She sent 3 servants after them, shouting, "Find them! Bring them back, or it's your heads instead of theirs." The children were resting near the forest's edge when they saw the servants in the distance. Lina gripped Fundevogel's hand. "Never leave me, and I'll never leave you." "Never," he said again. "Then become a rose tree, and I'll be the rose upon it." When the servants reached the spot, they found only a single rose bush swaying gently in the breeze. They returned empty-handed. The cook scolded them furiously. "You fools! You should have cut the bush and brought the rose home. Go back!" So they went again. But when the children saw them returning, Lina whispered, "Never leave me, and I'll never leave you." "Never. Then become a church, and I'll be the chandelier inside." When the servants arrived, they saw nothing but a quiet chapel, sunlight streaming through its windows, and a shining chandelier above the altar. Confused and frightened, they turned back once more. The cook stamped her feet and growled, "Useless lot! I'll go myself." So she lumbered into the woods, the servants trailing behind her. Lina and Fundevogel saw her coming, the 3 men running, and behind them the cook waddling with fury in her eyes. "Never leave me, and I'll never leave you," said Lina. "Never," said Fundevogel. "Then become a pond, and I'll be the duck upon it." By the time the cook reached the clearing, all she found was a shimmering pond reflecting the sky. She bent down, panting, her thirst and anger burning together. "I'll drink it dry," she muttered. But the duck glided across the water, sharp-eyed and waiting. As the cook lowered her head, the duck darted forward, seized her by the hair and pulled her under. The water stilled, the ripples faded. The witch was gone. Moments later, the pond shimmered and vanished, and in its place stood Fundevogel and Lina, safe, hand in hand. They made their way home, where the forester, overjoyed, welcomed them back. From that day forward, the children lived happily, free from harm and bound by a promise they would never break. "Never will I leave you, neither now nor ever." The end. The Brave Little Tailor. One bright summer morning, a cheerful little tailor sat at his work table by the window, stitching away with great enthusiasm. Outside, a woman's voice called down the street, "Good jam's cheap! Fresh jam, cheap!" The words caught the tailor's ear. He leaned out the window and called, "Come up here, good woman. You'll find a willing customer." Up she came, panting from the weight of her basket. The tailor inspected every jar, sniffing and examining each one with care. At last he said, "The jam seems fine. Measure me out 4 ounces. If it's a little over, that's all right." The woman, hoping for a big sale, was disappointed by such a small order and left grumbling under her breath. "Now," said the little tailor, "may this jam be blessed and give me strength." He cut a thick slice of bread, spread the jam generously, and placed it beside him to enjoy later, just after he finished sewing his jacket. But the smell of jam drifted up into the warm air, attracting a swarm of flies. They descended greedily. "Hey, who invited you?" cried the tailor, shooing them away. Yet they kept returning, more and more of them. Losing patience, he snatched a piece of cloth from under his table and struck them hard. When he lifted it again, 7 flies lay dead. "7 in one blow," he exclaimed, amazed at his own bravery. "The world must know of this." He quickly made himself a belt, embroidered in bold letters, "7 at one blow." Proud and inspired, the tailor decided the world was far too small for his courage. So he packed what little he owned, an old piece of cheese and a small bird he rescued from a bush, and set out to seek his fortune. The tailor's journey led him up a mountain where he met a huge giant sitting peacefully, watching the valley below. "Good day, friend," said the tailor. "You seem to see the world from here. I'm on my way to find my luck. Care to join me?" The giant sneered. "You miserable little man." "Oh, really?" the tailor replied. He opened his coat, revealing his embroidered belt. "Read this, and you'll see what kind of man I am." The giant read, 7 at one blow. He blinked, imagining the tailor had slain 7 men. A flicker of respect replaced his mockery. Still, the giant decided to test him. Picking up a stone, he crushed it in his hand until water dripped out. "Do that," said the giant. "That's easy," said the tailor. He pulled out his cheese and squeezed it until liquid oozed from it. "Better than yours, don't you think?" The giant frowned. Next he threw a stone so high it disappeared into the clouds. "Now you try," he said. "Well thrown," said the tailor. "But your stone came back down. I'll throw one that won't return." He released the bird he'd been carrying, and it flew far, far away. "How's that?" asked the tailor. The giant, now both impressed and confused, said, "You're a clever one, but let's see if you can carry something heavy." He led the tailor to a massive oak that had fallen in the forest. "Help me carry it out," said the giant. "Gladly," said the tailor. "You take the trunk, I'll manage the branches. They're the heaviest part." The giant lifted the trunk onto his shoulder. The tailor climbed up onto a branch and sat comfortably as the giant walked, unknowingly carrying him too. The tailor whistled a tune. 3 tailors rode forth from the gate, as if hauling a tree were nothing. When the giant grew tired and dropped the tree, the tailor jumped down, grabbed the branches and said, "You're such a big fellow and can't even carry this." Tisk. The 2 continued on until they reached a cherry tree. The giant bent down the top so the tailor could grab the ripest fruit, but when he let go, the branch snapped back and the tailor went flying high into the air before landing safely. "What's this?" laughed the giant. "Too weak to hold a branch?" The tailor brushed off his coat. "Weak? I jumped over the tree to dodge the hunters shooting in the forest. Try it yourself if you're so strong." The giant tried and got stuck among the branches. The tailor laughed, once again the victor. Impressed yet again, the giant invited him to spend the night in his cave. Inside, several other giants sat roasting entire sheep over a fire. The tailor thought, well, this is larger than my workshop. The giant pointed to a bed and told him to rest, but the bed was enormous, so the tailor curled up in a corner instead. At midnight, the giant crept over with an iron bar and struck the bed with one mighty blow, believing he'd crushed the tailor. Satisfied, he went back to sleep. At dawn, the tailor cheerfully walked up to the giants as if nothing had happened. They turned pale with fear and ran for their lives. The tailor wandered on until he reached a royal palace. Feeling tired, he lay down on the grass and slept. Passers-by noticed his belt. 7 at 1 blow. Word spread quickly. A mighty warrior rests in the king's garden. The king, curious, sent a messenger offering the tailor a position in his service. Perfect timing, said the tailor. That's exactly why I came. But the soldiers weren't pleased. If he can kill 7 at 1 blow, what chance do we have if he gets angry? They begged the king to dismiss him. The king, unwilling to offend the supposed warrior, devised a plan to send him on impossible missions. First, the king said, "In the forest live 2 giants who destroy villages and rob travellers. Defeat them, and you shall have my daughter and half my kingdom." The tailor smiled. 2 giants? That's nothing. I don't even need the 100 horsemen you offer. One who can slay 7 at 1 blow can handle 2. The tailor went alone into the forest, armed with nothing but pockets full of stones. Soon he found the giants asleep under a tree, snoring so loudly that the branches shook. Climbing into the tree above them, he dropped a stone on one giant's chest. The first stirred. "Why did you hit me?" "I didn't," grumbled the other. They fell asleep again. The tailor threw another stone, this time at the second giant. The 2 argued furiously, and finally, in their rage, they tore up trees and beat each other until both fell dead. The tailor climbed down, wiped his brow, and said, "Good thing they didn't pull up this tree, or I'd have had to jump like a squirrel." He pricked each with his sword to be sure, then returned to the king. "The work is done," he said. "They're dead. Hard fight, but I managed." When the king's horsemen confirmed the giants' bodies, the king grew uneasy. The king tried again. "Before you marry my daughter, you must capture a wild unicorn that terrorizes the forest." The tailor smiled. "A unicorn? Easier than giants." He took a rope and axe and entered the forest alone. When the unicorn charged, he dodged behind a tree. The beast rammed so hard its horn stuck deep into the trunk. "Got you now," said the tailor. He tied a rope around its neck, chopped its horn free, and led it back in triumph. Still, the king hesitated. "One last task. Catch the wild boar that destroys my lands." "Gladly," said the tailor. When the boar charged, he dashed into a nearby chapel and leapt out a window. The beast stormed inside, and the tailor slammed the door shut behind it. The huntsmen soon arrived, stunned to see the boar trapped. The king had no choice now. He gave his daughter to the tailor and half the kingdom besides. The wedding was grand, but uneasy. The princess, soon discovering her husband's humble past, complained to her father. The king promised to rid her of him. "Leave your door open tonight," he whispered. "My men will bind him and send him far away." But a loyal servant warned the tailor. That night, pretending to sleep, he began to mutter loudly, "Boy, sew that doublet, patch those pants, or I'll crack your ears. I killed 7 at 1 blow, 2 giants, caught a unicorn and a boar. Am I to fear men outside my door?" The king's men heard this and fled in terror, and so the little tailor, who once swatted 7 flies, ruled peacefully as a king for the rest of his days. The end. Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, near the edge of a great forest, lived a poor woodcutter, his wife, and his 2 children, a boy named Hansel and a girl named Gretel. Times were hard and a terrible famine had spread across the land. The woodcutter could barely find enough food for his family, and each night he lay awake in worry. One evening, as the children slept, he turned to his wife and whispered, "What will become of us? We have nothing left to eat." His wife sighed sharply. "Listen," she said. "Tomorrow morning we'll take the children deep into the forest. We'll build them a fire and give them a small piece of bread, and then we'll leave them there. We have no other choice." The woodcutter's heart broke. "How can I abandon my own children? Wild animals will tear them apart," but his wife would not yield. "Then we'll all starve together," she snapped. "It's this or death for all four of us." And so, in his despair, the man gave in. But Hansel and Gretel had not been asleep. Their empty stomachs kept them awake, and they heard every word. Gretel began to cry softly. "We're doomed," she whispered. Hansel took her hand. "Don't worry, little sister," he said. "I'll find a way to save us." When the moon rose, Hansel crept outside. The night was bright, and the ground sparkled with tiny white pebbles that shone like silver coins. He filled his pockets with as many as he could carry, then slipped back into bed beside Gretel. "Sleep well," he said. "God will not abandon us." Before dawn, their stepmother shook them awake. "Get up, lazybones, we're going into the forest to gather wood." She handed each a small piece of bread. "That's your lunch. Don't eat it too soon, because you'll get nothing else." Gretel hid her bread under her apron, while Hansel quietly held the smooth pebbles in his pocket. As they walked, Hansel kept turning around to glance behind them. "Hansel," his father said, "what are you looking at?" "Keep walking. I'm just watching my little white cat," Hansel replied. "She's sitting on the roof, waving goodbye." "Fool," said his stepmother. "That's just the morning sun on the chimney." But Hansel wasn't looking at any cat. With each glance, he dropped one bright pebble on the path. They walked deep into the forest until the father built a fire for them. "Sit here and rest," he said. "We'll be back when we're done cutting wood." Hansel and Gretel sat beside the crackling fire, eating their small pieces of bread. For hours they heard the sound of an axe nearby, or so they thought. In truth, their father had tied a branch to a tree so it knocked back and forth in the wind, making the sound of chopping. Eventually, the children grew tired and fell asleep by the fire. When they woke, night had fallen and the fire had gone cold. Gretel trembled. "We're all alone, Hansel. How will we get home?" Hansel smiled softly. "Wait until the moon rises, then we'll see our path." When the full moon climbed high into the sky, its light caught the trail of white pebbles shining like a path of stars. Hand in hand, Hansel and Gretel followed them all the way home. Their father opened the door in disbelief, tears in his eyes. "My children," he cried, but their stepmother scowled. "You naughty things," she said. "Where have you been? We thought you'd never return." Peace did not last long. Hunger returned and food vanished once more. Late one night, Hansel and Gretel heard their parents whispering again. "There's no bread left," said the wife. "We must take them even deeper into the forest this time. It's our only hope." The father protested, but his wife's cold words silenced him. Hansel rose quietly and tried to slip outside for more pebbles, but the door was locked. He sighed and turned to Gretel. "Don't cry," he said softly. "The good Lord will help us." At dawn they were shaken awake and handed smaller pieces of bread than before. On the walk, Hansel began to crumble his bread, dropping tiny crumbs along the path. "What are you doing, Hansel?" his father asked. "I'm saying goodbye to my little pigeon on the roof," Hansel said. "Fool," the woman snapped. "That's just the morning sun again." Deeper and deeper they went, farther than before. Another fire was built, and again the parents vanished. Night came, and Hansel whispered, When the moon rises, we'll follow my crumbs home. But when they tried, the crumbs were gone, eaten by the birds of the forest. The children wandered through the night, and all the next day, weak with hunger and fear, until at last they lay beneath a tree and fell asleep. The next morning the children continued walking, though their legs were weary and their bellies empty. At midday a snow-white bird perched on a branch began to sing so sweetly that they followed its melody through the trees until they came upon a strange little house. It was made entirely of sweets, the roof of cake, the walls of bread, and the windows of sparkling sugar. "Look, Gretel," Hansel said, eyes wide. "We can finally eat." He broke off a bit of the roof, and Gretel nibbled on the sugar window pane. Suddenly a voice called from inside, "Nibble, nibble, gnaw! Who's nibbling at my house so small?" The wind, they answered, "the gentle wind." And they went on eating. Then the door creaked open, and out hobbled an old woman leaning on a cane. Her back was bent, her eyes small and red, but her voice was sweet. "Ah, you poor dears," she said kindly. "Come inside and stay with me. You must be hungry." Inside she gave them milk, pancakes, apples and nuts, and 2 soft beds with clean white sheets. The children fell asleep, thinking they were safe. But the old woman was not kind at all. She was a witch who lured children with sweets so she could feast on them. Early the next morning she grabbed Hansel by the arm and locked him inside a small cage. "Eat, my boy," she said with a wicked grin. "I'm going to fatten you up." She turned to Gretel. "And you, fetch water and cook for your brother. When he's ready, I'll eat him." Gretel wept bitterly, but could not disobey. Each day she brought food to Hansel, while the witch checked his finger to see if he'd grown plump. Clever Hansel, however, held out a thin bone instead. The witch's dim eyes deceived her, and she grumbled, "Still too thin. Eat more." Weeks passed, and she grew impatient. "Fat or not, I'll eat him tomorrow," she snarled. "Gretel, heat the oven." The next morning, the witch told Gretel to check if the oven was hot enough. Flames licked the edge of the door. "Crawl in and see," she said. "If it's ready, we'll bake the bread." But Gretel saw through her trick. "I don't know how to get inside," she said. "Show me." "Simpleton," the witch hissed. "Watch like this." She leaned forward and poked her head into the oven. Quick as lightning, Gretel gave her a mighty shove, slammed the iron door, and bolted it shut. The witch shrieked and pounded on the door, but it was too late. Gretel ran to Hansel's cage, crying, "Hansel, she's gone, we're free!" Hansel burst out, and together they hugged and laughed and danced in relief. Searching the cottage, they found chests filled with jewels and pearls. "These will do better than pebbles," Hansel said, stuffing his pockets. Gretel filled her apron too. Hand in hand they set off once more. After hours of walking they reached a wide river with no bridge. Then Gretel saw a white duck gliding across the water. Little duck, do you see? Hansel and Gretel are waiting for thee," she called. The duck carried them safely across one by one. As they neared the edge of the forest, everything began to look familiar. They ran faster, and soon their father's cottage came into view. They rushed inside and threw their arms around him. The poor man had never stopped mourning them. His cruel wife was gone, and his joy returned at last. When Hansel and Gretel emptied their treasures, the house glittered with jewels and laughter filled the air again. And so they lived together, safe and happy, with full hearts and full bellies. And that, dear listener, is the story of Hansel and Gretel, a tale of courage, cleverness, and the unbreakable bond between brother and sister. The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage. Once upon a time, a mouse, a bird, and a sausage decided to live together and share their work. It was an odd trio, but somehow it worked. Each had a job that suited them perfectly. The bird flew into the forest each day to gather wood for the fire. The mouse fetched water from the well and kept their little home tidy. And the sausage, yes, the sausage, handled the cooking, preparing the most delicious meals anyone could imagine. Their teamwork brought them comfort and plenty. They were content, living together in peace and laughter, each evening ending with a full table and happy hearts. But when people, or in this case animals, are too comfortable, they often start to long for something new. One morning, while flying through the forest, the bird met another bird perched high on a branch. Proud of his household, he began to brag about how well things were going. The other bird, however, scoffed. "You're doing all the hard work," the stranger said. "While you're out gathering wood, your mouse and sausage friends stay cozy at home. The mouse just makes the fire and fetches a bit of water, then rests all day. And the sausage? He simply lounges by the pot, tossing himself in at the end to season the meal. Meanwhile, you're working from sunrise to sunset. Seems unfair to me." Those words stuck like burrs in the bird's mind. By the time he returned home, his pride had soured into envy. The next morning, the bird announced, "I'm done being your servant. From now on, we're changing things up." The mouse and the sausage begged him not to. "Everything works just as it should," they pleaded. "Why upset it?" But the bird was determined. They decided to draw lots to make it fair. Fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humour, because it fell to the sausage to gather wood, the mouse to do the cooking, and the bird to fetch the water. So they began their new routine, though none felt entirely at ease. That day the sausage set out to collect wood. The bird built the fire, and the mouse started preparing the pot. But as the hours passed, the sausage did not return. Worried, the bird flew into the forest to look for him. Before long, he came across a dog sitting by the roadside, looking rather smug. "Have you seen my friend, the sausage?" the bird asked. The dog licked his lips. "Oh, you mean the one who had false papers," he said. "I found him travelling under suspicious circumstances. Naturally, I confiscated him." "Confiscated?" gasped the bird. "Swallowed," the dog said plainly. "Justice served." Horrified and heartbroken, the bird gathered the bundle of wood and flew home to tell the mouse what had happened. The mouse wept bitterly for their lost friend, but she and the bird agreed they must carry on together. Trying to prepare dinner as the sausage once did, the mouse thought, "Perhaps if I cook just like him, things will feel normal again." So she lit the fire, and when the pot began to bubble, she climbed onto the rim and tried to roll in and out among the vegetables the way the sausage had done to season the stew. But the poor mouse wasn't made for such things. She never came out again. When the bird returned with the water, the fire was blazing too high, the pot boiling over, and his dear friend nowhere to be found. Panicked, the bird threw the wood around the room, calling for the mouse again and again, but there was no answer. The scattered wood caught fire, and flames began to spread. Desperate to stop the blaze, the bird grabbed a bucket and rushed to the well, but as he leaned over to fill it, the pail slipped from his claws and tumbled down. In his frantic attempt to retrieve it, he fell in too, and was swallowed by the dark water. And so the once happy household of the mouse, the bird, and the sausage came to its tragic end, all because one of them could not see the value in what they already had. The end. And so our journey through the Brothers Grimm comes to an end, a path woven with courage, kindness, and a touch of magic in every tale. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more nights of wonder and nostalgia. Your support helps keep these timeless tales alive. Until next time, may your dreams be filled with lantern light, golden birds, and happy endings.